So today we are joined by the lovely and talented Miss Jacqueline Twillie. Welcome to the Own Your Genius podcast, Jacqueline.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here for our conversation.
I'm so excited for you to be here. I know that I've been on your podcast, but this is our first time being switched. And I really want to get into your story. So what we're doing is a segment called Woman to Woman, where we're really just exploring the entrepreneur journey of different women, the challenges and the wins and everything, because social media will have you believe that entrepreneurship is one-dimensional, like it's all raw, 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 and it's not. And so
Right.
we want to talk about that today. So tell me about Zerogap.
Yes. Thank you again for having me. Zerogap is a leadership development firm. We're based in Dallas, Texas, and we serve clients all over the world.
Mhm.
And what we do is we specialize in women's leadership for companies that are in traditionally male-dominated industries. So more specifically, that looks like strategy on negotiation skill training to level up your teams, because people negotiate internally as much as they do externally. We do risk and resilience training and a lot of executive presence. That's just a high level.
How did you get into that? That's really interesting, especially for you working with women that are in male-dominated fields, because most of the professional industry is male-dominated. So what made you want to focus on that?
Yes. So there are two things. One is a few years ago, I came in contact with an organization that introduced me to the gender wage gap.
Mm.
And I got so pissed about the gender wage gap, I decided to do something. So as I was looking at ways to close the gap, one of the ways that I identified to solve it was to teach women to negotiate, because there are so many factors, which means there are many, many solutions. And then along that, directly related to teaching women to negotiate, is helping women to advance in leadership. So it's less than 9% of CEOs, and it's probably less than 9%, like maybe 7, I think, of women who are CEOs in Fortune 100 companies. So with Zerogap, not only are we working to eliminate the gender wage gap, but we're also working to eliminate the leadership gap. Because when we get more women in leadership positions, then that in turn helps us reduce the wage gap as well. So that's kind of how it got started, that part. But the through line of that is I've always been in leadership roles all of my life. I've always been elected to, whether it's student government or cheerleader president or whatever chapter president, anything from elementary school, I've always been a leader. So when I got my MBA, my concentration is in leadership as well. So that just also gave me the extra push to start this company.
And that what I was going to ask you is, when you got introduced to the gender wage gap, what were you doing at that time? Were you already doing something in leadership and executive presence, or did you have to make a shift to follow your passion?
I was doing something in leadership. Part of that is, I told you, I've always been leading organizations since a very young age. My technical job was program operations at the Center for Disease Control. So I was working in disease eradication and elimination. So most vaccine preventable diseases is what I was supporting on the operations side. In addition to that, I was the vice president of professional development for all of the Center for Disease Control worldwide. And that's an elected role that I did on top of my duties. So I was also, at the same time where I started this company, in a leadership role for the young government leaders in Atlanta. And I was just rolling off of the chapter leader for Labo League, which is that organization that I mentioned before. So I was already doing a lot of professional development, leadership development, in addition to my day job.
Okay, Miss Leader, President. I always know, because we know each other, so you're really great at networking and making connections and building relationships. So it's really, like, I can absolutely see you leading everything that you do and touch. So that's really great. Now, when you were talking about your day job, which is working at CDC, When you decided to start Zerogap, did you kind of transition into entrepreneurship, or did you take a big leap?
So I had a strategy
Okay.
when I left the Center for Disease Control. I had already started building my business part time on the side. I had written my first book, which became a bestseller while I was at CDC. So I worked full time and I wrote the book in the evening. I actually adjusted my work schedule to get off at 3 p.m. so I could have more time to write. I had paid clients and contracts signed. So by the time I left CDC, I already had a book of business that was generating revenue. So like when people say they took the big leap, a lot of people that I know personally end up going back to the traditional workforce because they will quote unquote leap and there's no strategy, there's no plan, and there's no revenue. So in a couple of months, when the bills start piling up, you got to make a move. Um, so I did take a leap, but it was a very calculated leap.
I love that. I love it because, like you said, and nowadays people will shame entrepreneurs for having a day job and not just working that entrepreneur that their job full on. And you can't do that. You first of all, starting a business costs money. It takes strategy. You have to have a plan, and you can't just wake up one day and say, "Oh, I want to start a business," and then just call in people. But people do it all the time, and like you say, oftentimes they either end up going back to the 9 to 5 or they end up struggling more than they have to. If they were to use that 9 to 5 to fund their business and allow them to have a cushion so they can properly strategize and execute and build that book of business, then they would have started off on a better foot. So I like
I,
the way that
I
you
agree.
transition.
I do tell a lot of women that when they come to me asking for advice about starting a business, I will always tell them everything that you need to fund in your business, your day job is your first investor. You don't have to go out pitching investors. If you got a solid salary, you can use that to grow. But to be honest with you, people don't want to hear that because, like you said, they only want to do the glamorous Instagrammy side of it of like, yeah, I'm my own boss. But when it comes to subscriptions and software, that stuff costs.
It pays to be the boss. That's what they say. It pays to be the boss. The boss has to pay.
Yes, the boss has to
The
pay.
boss has to pay. I know I was the same way. I wanted to start my business, my own law firm, and I was working with an attorney. And I tried to see if we could partner up, but it really didn't work out. The relationship is still great, but I really wanted to have my own practice. So I worked with him, got my book of business, and then transitioned into having my own practice. And even when I transitioned, I always tell people, a lot of people don't know this, even when I transitioned, I was doing general law, but then I transitioned to trademarks, copyright, and business development. And when I did that, that's all I marketed. That's all people saw. But in the back, to keep the lights on, I was still taking criminal cases and disability because as an entrepreneur, you have to do what you have to do in order to succeed and survive. A lot of us are going into entrepreneurship so that we can have more time, so that we can support our families. And when we just leap instead of transition, we're setting ourselves up for failure a lot of times.
Yep.
I like that you transitioned into entrepreneurship. I know you transitioned and you had a plan and a strategy, but we all know that entrepreneurship is not without its challenges. When you are faced with these challenges, when you're working through your day to day, how do you handle those challenges?
What I do now is when I have a challenge, my office is downtown Dallas, right across the street from the big park downtown.
Mm-hmm.
I just go outside and I walk around the park. Like I had to do it today. I had a situation. Um, so I put my shoes on because when I'm in my office, I'm barefoot. But I put my heels on. I went outside. I walked to the park. I walked around a little bit, just kind of feeling the fresh air and that energy to clear my head. Because I feel like the worst thing for me when I have a challenge is try to figure it out when I feel frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing that I do is in my office building is a meditation room. So what I do on days where I have a lot of meetings, I book the meditation room in advance,
Mm-hmm.
and I try to find where I feel like will be my most stressful points of the day, and I just go and I meditate, and I put that on the schedule, and I book the room and everything, so I go in there and clear my head so I can make good decisions.
I like that. So you're responding instead of reacting. So
Yep.
I like that. That's good. Now I know my value. Tell
Yes.
me about that. How did that come about? I love it.
So that came about because I talked to Whitney a lot. Whitney from Speakerazi.
Hmm.
And we were on the phone talking about something, and I told her, nah, I know my value. Well, we were talking another time, and I was telling her about a situation, and I said it again. And I kept saying this when we were on the phone to the point where she texted me one day and was like, check your email. And she had designed that logo that you see on my t-shirts and on my swag, because every time I would say it, that popped up in her head. So the situations that caused me to say that were
Hmm.
situations where I knew the value that I was adding to someone, and
Hmm.
there were opportunities that I was attracting that weren't in alignment with the value that I was delivering. But I also was putting out some vibes in the atmosphere where I was calling in these situations where I had to say, now I know my value one too many times. So that's where it came from.
So putting it out there in the atmosphere. So tell me about some of your favorite affirmations.
Yes. So, well, you know this because we talk a lot, but I
Mhm.
expanded my container
Yes.
to receive is one of my favorite affirmations. One of my affirmations that I've been on for a few months now is even my flops do well.
Okay.
And I don't know where I got that from. Maybe a Beyonce song, but I never read that on a sticky note. And then one of my other affirmations is things are always working out for me, because
Yeah.
things are always working out for me. And then my favorite affirmation right now is it's winning season.
It's-
So no matter what I touch is the win because it's winning season.
How did you get into affirmations and just working on your mindset?
Back when I was at the CDC, I had a supervisor who super awesome, but I had a stressful day. I actually had someone who was a colleague who didn't have anyone reporting to her, but she was a senior level, who made my life challenging. And she knew how to push my buttons like nobody's business.
Hmm.
Like it was just kind of like she could read my face and she would know what to do to tick me off. And my supervisor, he was like, let's go to lunch. So we walked to lunch one day and he was like, you need to get some affirmations because you have to deal with her. And she is difficult to deal with. Everybody knows that. She's that person where you see her coming and you try to cut down the hallway the other direction.
Wow.
So he would tell me like get some affirmations and I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. But he would see me stressed out and he would know it. He would be like, oh, you must have just talked to such and such. And I would say, yeah. And he was like, what's your affirmation? So one day he sent me an email. He's like, can you come to my office? And when I went to his office, there was this big table in there. He was
Hmm.
like, you have to write down some affirmations because I can't see you frustrated and pissed and about to go off on this woman. So that's how I got started.
That's good. So it's a way for you to kind of control the day around you, just control what's happening. I like that. I like that a lot. So earlier you mentioned writing a best-selling book. Can we talk about your books?
Yes.
Let's talk about it. I want you to tell me about your books.
Okay, so I have two books and a workbook.
Okay.
The first book is Navigating the Career Jungle is the first one. That's a guide for young professionals, and that book is more of a blueprint to set yourself up for success in your career. And I
Mhm.
wrote that book in 2013. The most interesting thing about it is that a lot of companies have reached out to me in 2020 because I have a section in my first chapter on virtual networking, and everybody feels like that section is relevant to what we're living in right now, which it is.
It
But I've
is.
always been a big networker, so I knew how to work online networking back in the day. So that's been interesting. The other bestseller is Don't Leave Money on the Table. That's my second book, and that's negotiation strategies. So that's the book where I talk about my 5-step method for negotiating, which is called the latte method. And that is so, so effective in terms of people knowing how to strategize each negotiation, and it results in higher outcomes, whether it's a business deal, whether it's a salary, whether it's something personal. People are applying this to different aspects of their lives, and they're seeing greater results in negotiations than they were prior to using this latte method.
I like that. And I'm going to see. Yup, I knew I did. Right here on my bookshelf.
Yeah.
I have. Is it showing?
It is
I
showing.
love
I
this
see
book.
it.
Yeah. Oh, and there's a current. I love Don't Leave Money on the Table. I really, really, it's applicable even for me as an entrepreneur, because I will tell you, I was a little, when it came to negotiation, most of the time I think of, okay, here's some conflict. They want something, I want something. Let's put our boxing gloves on and get it. But my friend Jacqueline taught me that negotiation is a conversation and it's not necessarily a battle. And if I go in there prepared, then we can actually have that conversation and I can not be anxious, and yeah, I can get what I want. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And the workbook too. I love the workbook. I love how you tell us that negotiation is a conversation, but then in the workbook, you flip it and you teach us how to have these conversations. Like you walk us through what we need to prepare to have this conversation. So kudos and thank you for that. Now,
My pleasure.
good. So what I wanted to say, or what I said earlier, is that you are the master networker. Like hands down, you are. Earlier, you mentioned that in the Career Jungle, you have a chapter on virtual networking. Can you just share with us, like maybe 1 or 2 tips on just networking, and especially for introverts like myself, because you know how I am. You know, I would just sit at home in a corner by myself. So what tips do you have for us?
Yes. So in the book, it is page, and this is the Navigating the Career Jungle book, where I
Mm-hmm.
start talking about online networking strategies. And so the biggest thing, couple of tips that I will tell you is you want to be organized and you want to use an app to connect with people. My
Okay.
app preference is LinkedIn. So
Okay.
I have an entire paragraph that tells you what to do with your LinkedIn strategy. So before you, for especially for introverts, before you decide that you're going to start networking online, you have to set a networking intention or an
Okay.
objective. What is my purpose for networking online today? So once you figure out what your purpose is, that will inform what events you go to. So I tell you in here a couple of websites you can go to find events. So you want to
Mm-hmm.
vet the event after you set your intention. And then after you set the intention, you vet the event. That includes looking at the price, how long is it, can you have time away from your family or whatever, because everything's virtual. And then you want to put together a one-line introduction that you're going to send to people after the networking event on LinkedIn. So the follow up strategy is my secret sauce,
Okay.
because you can all meet people, but if you don't follow up with them, then you wasted your time building a connection. So in here, and this book has been out, like I said, since I wrote it in 2013. It's been out since 2014. People who get this book and follow it, they know my thesis of my networking strategy, but most people don't want to
Okay.
put in the effort. So anyway, those are the things I will tell you to do. Don't forget the follow up though.
Don't forget the follow up. Don't forget the follow up. And when people work with you for executive coaching and presence, is that one of the things that you teach them?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So right now, what my executive coaching clients are doing is they're building their list to send out holiday cards, because what I give them my personal calendar. On Halloween, I am addressing and signing my Christmas cards. So right now, my clients are writing their list of people that they're going to send holiday cards to. And they follow the same schedule that I follow in terms of getting cards out to my network.
What year did you start Zerogap?
I've been full-time in Zerogap now for 5 years in August, but 2 years before that, when I was still at the CDC, a year and a half. So 2014.
And the reason I asked is because while you were talking about your program, the question that popped in my head was, how has your business transitioned or grown or just kind of changed since you started it 6 or 7 years ago?
When I was in graduate school, one of my professors used to work for Chrysler, GM, and Ford. And because I was in the Midwest, I was in Ohio. So one of the cautionary tales he would tell us is you don't want to get stuck with the same products and services and feel like that is the only thing you're going to offer in infinity, because that is the way of dinosaurs. Meaning, if we look at Kodak was so set on camera film that they didn't innovate, they didn't grow. And when we think about Blockbuster was so into physical stores that they turned down the offer to buy Netflix. So even though Netflix wasn't around when I was in graduate school, Blockbuster was still popping. And I think maybe Netflix was by mail. But anyway, here's the point. I knew when I started my business had to grow and evolve. And I think that's one of my competitive advantages, is because I never got married to one single product or service that I offered. My core value is still the same: to eliminate the gender wage gap, to fit the times, but my mission will stay the same. How I achieve the mission will change. Because I learned that early on, I'm always thinking about what's next for my business. And I do not get so attached to one particular idea or one particular service area that I stay stuck. And so you'll see that over just the course of my business and my businesses, because I had another business before Zerogap. I actually had to shut it down because it was a conflict of interest when I worked at AT&T. But I had the same concept of always innovating, always trying new things, moving fast. Put yourself out of business so your competitor doesn't, by offering the new service.
I love that. A lot of people are so, like you said, married and attached to what they create that they don't stay with the ebb and flow. So they just try to keep pushing and forcing what they have on the people, and people are already up on to the next thing. And we have to not be a blockbuster and take advantage of those opportunities to grow and scale. So we are now on to what I call the genius round. The genius round is just really quick questions just to get your first thought and input on these questions. So first question, what does owning your genius mean to you?
Owning my genius means protecting my brand, and I got that from you. So protecting my IP.
All right. And just to piggyback on that, have you had opportunities where when you're negotiating and talking with people where that has been an issue, your IP and trying to people are trying to take your stuff? I know. That's why I asked.
I've had. Yeah, that's probably one of my biggest mistakes, is not protecting my intellectual property out the gate, which now I will easily say, now I know my value. This ain't going to work for me because I understand the value of the IP.
Right. And I like that. So when you get these contracts that say they're going to own something, you're like, nope, you won't own it. I'll license it to you under these parameters, but no, you won't own it, and you can't resell it.
I turned down many of things and didn't lose sleep about turning them down.
Because now you know your value, right?
Yes.
What is your favorite business or mindset book?
My favorite mindset book is actually titled Mindset by Carol Dweck. And it's the new psychology of success. And I read this book every year. It's one of the most recommended books that I give in any of my talks on any topic.
What advice would you give to someone that's considering entrepreneurship?
My advice to them would be, think of the problem that you're passionate about solving, and then build your business from that.
Jacqueline, thank you again for being a guest on the Own Your Genius podcast, and definitely for participating in the Woman to Woman interview. How can we get in touch with you?
Thank you again for letting me be a guest. So my favorite place to hang out online is LinkedIn. So reach out to me on LinkedIn. Let me know that you heard me on this podcast and we can connect. But I'm all over the internet, y'all. So anywhere you are on the internet, I'm there too. Jacqueline Twillie.